Pigeons 420. Mr. Grow It. And Rob from Cannabis Lifestyle TV. From the Stash Podcast.
From the Stash Podcast. It's definitely, it's cool, man. I'm glad to be smoking with you guys. Chris, Pigeons.
Good day.
Yeah, glad to be here. Definitely looking forward to this discussion today. Talking about legalization, something I think almost all of us want to happen is for cannabis to be legal and us to freely be able to, not only consume, but also be able to grow. So this discussion is going to be revolving around that.
Yeah. You ever get a deal where your desk is so fucking crowded, you got nowhere to put a thing you just picked up? You're like, how was that there 2 seconds ago? Now I can't put it back. Like, I got to get a new setup here.
I was gonna say, what you need is a camera that captures 3/4 of your desk, and you will keep nothing on it. Imagine that. Everything is just stashed on this little table, little bong table off to the side, just full stuff full on top of the fridge, but not on the desk yet. Not on the desk. Just this horrible product placement.
Very smart man. Very smart man. So I don't know about in Canada. I know here in America, we've got some states that some are unexpected for me. I didn't expect to be on the ballots this year for legalization. Some little slower than honestly anticipated when it comes especially full legalization. But in particular right now, we've got 4 states for recreational adult use. We got Arizona, Montana, New Jersey, and South Dakota. South Dakota is one I was kind of surprised to see on there, but stereotypes of certain areas, things change over time. I think a lot of it is the financial gain. A lot of these places are looking to change more. And then on the medical side, Mississippi, yes, believe it or not, Mississippi is pushing it. I don't really know too much about what their plan is. I know it's not as flexible as what a lot of other states have done, but any form is a start. And then also South Dakota. So South Dakota is going all in on rec and medical.
That's good to hear. It's nice to hear the variety of states. Mississippi, yes, slightly surprising to me, but this is a new shift in perception around cannabis. You see the definitely slow changes that are happening, not just domestically, but internationally as well. You've got Canada that's went legal. You've got other countries that have gone legal, and naturally you'd see that the United States is going to follow suit. It's going to be slow. I think you're going to see these states go one by one. But what is encouraging is the diversity of the amount of states that are getting on board with the legalization of cannabis. So this is a big step and something to be celebrated for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the article by Leafly right now, kind of showing like the current polls. And Rob just mentioned kind of the states that were on the ballot this year, and it looks like most of them are going to actually pass. The South Dakota looks like their medical is looking to pass, but they're mostly opposed to the actual rec side of things. So that would be interesting. Mississippi is kind of a 50-50. So that's probably the state that probably won't pass, in my opinion, might not pass.
Mm-hmm.
And then Arizona, this is the second time it was on the ballot or third time?
Yeah, I believe second.
And it's looking like it's a 55-37 as of right now. So I don't know what these are as far as like how accurate these are, but it's looking pretty good for most of those states. And that's great to hear. I myself am in a legal state. I'm in Nevada. So I've been legal since 2016, but definitely rooting for the other states to come along on board.
And what I think is important too to note is that even if this is not like Mississippi, you're saying it's 50%. I think what is important here is that it's on the ballot. You know what I mean? One time you're going to have these people making the votes. You're going to see where people stand. The constituents are then going to realize, okay, either they are for what I believe in or they're against what I believe in. They will realign themselves in like the next by-election, or I'm not sure how the electoral process in fully works at a state level in the states. But it's these small changes. Whether it makes the ballot and gets denied the first time, that's a step forward. That is a step forward. See it on the ballot. So champion that for sure.
Dude, one crazy thing on the ballot is in Oregon. So in the U.S., they are looking to potentially legalize regulated medicinal use of psilocybin, or shrooms for those of you who aren't familiar. And I see the benefit in there, especially with depression and being able to help people on the mental side of things. So medically, I totally get that. Then the thing that was a little more kind of stood out to me, we'll say, is the decriminalization of small amounts of all drugs. So John, Green Goblin broke down a good point. He's also on the call here if anybody has not picked that up yet. But it's crazy to think, that people could just carry their own like small amount of drugs on there and there's no problem. But at the same time, you do get where somebody, let's say, has a serious drug problem and they're just consistently going to prison or jail, and it's taxpayer money that does pay for that often. So would it make more sense to maybe help those people medically or get them into some sort of like treatment, or always punish them for crime? So it kind of opens it up where it's a double-edged sword. Some people are going to take advantage of it, just like anything good, people take advantage of it. But to see decriminalization of all drugs, that was a very interesting one to me. Like, wow. What do you guys think?
So you're talking even like heroin and meth, all that stuff would be decriminalized entirely.
Small amounts of everything.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a massive issue with that. The issue with that is, as you mentioned, the alternative that we're doing right now is people are getting locked up for small possessions of drugs. Taxpayers are paying for that. When you decriminalize of all drugs, you're not changing that dynamic. Taxpayers are still going to be on the foot for the fines. When it's decriminalized, it just means that it's no longer criminal. It's still illegal, but it's not criminal. So it's the same way that you can get a traffic ticket. You can be 20 over the speed limit. It's illegal to speed, but it's not criminal. So you're not going to jail for it. But the taxpayer is still on the hook because the state is not able to make any revenue on a decriminalized substance or any kind of product for that matter, because you can't regulate it in terms of how much can someone have. What you can, but then where are they going to get it? Because although it's decriminalized, it's not legal to sell. It's not legal to make. It's not legal to distribute or pack. You know what I mean? So you still need an illegal framework, a black market, to supply the economy with those drugs. The state or the taxpayer gets no relief from that whatsoever. So decriminalizing isn't the solution. You need to legalize and regulate substances. You know, humans are going to make decisions and they're going to come into contact with things that are either good or bad for them, and they need to be able to make those decisions for themselves. And as long as those decisions don't impact others, you know, they're self-harming in some case, then this shouldn't be an issue, right? So I do take issue with decriminalization, but some argue it's a step in the right direction. Go ahead.
Yeah, Green Goblin, what do you got to add there, bro?
Yeah, I was just going to add that I absolutely 100% agree that is the best way to go about it. But at least in the meantime, some, small users aren't going to go to jail every single time they get popped and get caught with a bunch of fines and a bunch of, hotel bill and all this.
Yeah. It's
and
that double-edged sword.
Be able to get into treatment with the money that they're not spending on jail and not be in the same cogwheel, and eventually the taxpayers wouldn't have to pay.
Hypothetically, that sounds great, but the reality is that somebody who gets busted with a small amount of X, whether it's cocaine, whether it's methamphetamines, I'm just gonna say X. When you get busted with that, you're still getting fined. So these fines could be atrocious. You could be for say a gram of Y, I'm gonna say instead of X, you could be charged $1,500. There might not be any rehab associated with that ticket. There might not be any kind of formal rehabilitation. It could be a fine, which is then going to even further inhibit somebody to be able to rehabilitate themselves. And then again, the same thing is if you were in it for the smaller individual, medical assistance or rehabilitation would be number one. That's why you would want to regulate that product. By decriminalizing it, you're putting the hands in the cartel, or the money and the resources in the cartel, because they're the only ones that can profit from a decriminalized system. Why? Because it's not regulated. You don't have a framework for people to really profit from. It's only because you can't sell it, right? If it's decriminalized, it's still illegal to have, except for maybe small amounts, but it's still illegal to sell. It's still illegal to distribute. So who is doing that? Illegal cartels. So while a small user falls through the cracks, while a powerful gang, cartel, or mob is gaining traction in a market that they've already capitalized on, because it's the illegal market for a reason. So bring that illegal market out of the darkness and bring it into the public light with proper regulation and guidance and policy.
And that's where a lot of it is, like with legal cannabis, is where in some states, some areas that's been the case, is where they've almost over-regulated in some senses, where like the people who've been doing it ethically are screwed. Yeah, the ethical growers, the mom and pop shops, the people who are doing it are priced out of what they're doing because of full legalization, where some people argue decriminalizing still makes it so you can do your thing in a sense. But again, like you were saying, when the fines come in, you're not going to go to jail for speeding tickets, but you will for multiple, and you're not paying them unpaid. And I bet you'd be the same scenario here. If you're not paying for 5 times getting busted with some pills that weren't, your prescription, at that point, you're probably going to go to jail. So it's really, there's good and bad. I definitely see it. It's almost like you wish you could get everybody together and be like, all right, guys, let's just do this on the up and up. You're trying to get off of this stuff. So if you have a little bit on you, it's not the end of the world, but that just isn't how it goes. People abuse every sort of system.
Because it's got to come from somewhere, right?
Exactly.
And the big problem that the only reason that I'm okay with the decriminalization is that most of the people in control in our political sphere are rather old and have old beliefs and don't necessarily understand legalization and taxation could be a good thing.
Yeah, well, and see, that's where I think looking at the taxation, that's where I think this is on the federal level and the state level. And we're talking U.S., it varies. In Canada, I know we're going to get into that. Pigeons is the guy for that because I know nada. I'll fully admit that. But when it comes to America, you've got a lot of states that are struggling financially. And I think creating this new industry that's already there, that's the key thing. It's an industry that's already there in most places. To capitalize on it, to regulate it, but to not poach it, to not go in and just slaughter it. And that's what a lot of these, bills do is they leave it open for lobbyists and for big, gigantic conglomerates to come in and just take over. Michigan's bill was decent. The one that they put together was decent. But then immediately we had people lobbying to make it so the caregivers couldn't, sell or donate, we have weird lingo here, their cannabis to the dispensaries, which is where the best quality and best price cannabis was. They were trying to say it wasn't safe, it was unhealthy. And the argument that they had no fucking legs because most of these places were being tested the same labs that you're bringing the stuff for the recreational side or for the big gigantic conglomerates. They're one of the same places. And some of these labs have been busted for dirty practices. So it's just crazy to see that, again, the good gets open. Someone tries to do something good and it gets exploited so quickly, whether it be the little guys, the illegal side, or even legal. It's the bill is what matters most. Legalization, decriminalization, all these things, like the actual thing they're proposing, I think is what people need to look into the most. So if you hear your state in this podcast or you're here talking about it, definitely look up the exact bill because Prop 1 was decent. I voted for it. I was for it. But what it's turned into, I'm not a big fan of at all.
When it comes to full-blown decriminalization, it's something that quite frankly scares me. And the reason why is because if you're decriminalizing all drugs, we're talking heroin, we're talking fentanyl, right? I mean, the amount of people over the years, I grew up in Massachusetts, and literally hundreds of people that I've grown up with are dead, due to that. So
it's not an awesome subject. And the fact of the matter is even if it was decriminalized, the people that unfortunately pass from these drugs would already anyways pass because they get the drugs, whether it's decriminalized, criminalized, illegal or not. They're after the drugs and they'll find them if they're that persistent about it. And it's a very unfortunate thing.
Yeah,
I think it just opens the floodgate more,
Yeah, people are going to think it's okay. People are going to think it's okay. It's not as bad. It's not as bad of a penalty. So why not do it? If I'm only going to get fined for it, why not do it? And then all of a sudden more people, I think deaths will increase, unfortunately, if it was full-blown legalization for all drugs.
Real unfortunate fact is that in the United States here, fentanyl's a Schedule II drug. It's not even a Schedule I drug. Fentanyl is easier to get online and shipped to your house legally than it is to get cannabis or
in the U.S. at least.
In the U.S., yeah, absolutely.
That's fucking crazy. I didn't even know that. And see, that's the problem too. Is
it's a Schedule II drug in the U.S. and that's why they mix it into everything here to try to bump up their profits and get people hooked and blah blah blah. The bad drug dealers.
Well, here's the big difference when it comes to drugs like that. You and I can't grow that at our house and produce it at our house. With cannabis, I think that's why it's been so hard to push it through. Is it's not about keeping the people safe, the citizens safe, or doing what's best for people. It's literally regulating it for money. I know people here who their only thing they got in trouble with was the RICO Act for taxes. It wasn't anything to do with them doing illegal sales of cannabis. It came down to money. And it always breaks down to money. And I think that's where once the states are seeing what other states are doing or other countries are doing, it's easier to jump on board. But a lot of it flows down from the top. And we're going to touch on the presidential stuff. Just want to put this disclaimer out there. None of us have too strong of opinions, in my opinion, about either side, either party. This is totally just based on our opinions on the facts that we see that are listed out there that are in public areas you're able to look up. But when it comes down to like left or right, we are definitely not in that conversation. This is just about cannabis legalization and how it's impacted based on these things. So with that being said, going from the top down, if it was fully federally legalized, it's not up to the states. Then we don't have different plans. We don't have different, proposals that come into play that sound good on paper until you get deeper into it. We've got one full solid plan. And I get we're in America, it's the United States, so we kind of leave it up to the states in that sense. But it's such a shit show. Some areas it's working real well. Some areas haven't had, dispensaries or any area to get cannabis in a year plus. I mean, you've got Florida where you damn near got to be dead to get your card. There's a lot of variables that come into play where if it was on a federal level, it may be more attractive for the states to jump on board. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think leaving up to the states, when we start talking about presidential candidates, Trump and Biden, I think both of them want to leave it up to the states. It seems like, from what I'm gathering, as far as full blown legalization, I don't see that happening in the next 4 years, no matter which candidate gets chosen. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong there.
Well, if they do, it's just like we were saying before the podcast. I think it's for votes. I don't think it's for authentically saying, hey, this will help our economy. This will help the people. They need it. That never seems to be the conversation. It seems to be using for that vote card to be like, hey, we're about it. And if you look back, statistically, not statistically, facts, originally, Biden was really for moving it to Schedule 2, I believe it was, Schedule 2 narcotic.
Yep.
And that would be regulated by the pharmaceutical industry. And that's so no for me. I'm like, what the fuck? That's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. But then at the same time, you've got, I believe it was Sessions, I think he rescinded one of the memos that basically kept the Cole memo that protected states, their legal cannibal, holy shit, totally stoned, works out. Cannabis legal reform, whatever they've set up, basically the feds can come in and fuck them over. So it's gotten to the point now where it's like both parties don't really care about cannabis. And when they do, when they bring it up, it totally, in my opinion, seems like it's just to get those voters to be like, all right, stoners, let's go here.
Right. And I totally agree with that statement. I feel like at this point, if either party was going to come, what are we? How far are we away? You got November 9th? Correct me if I'm wrong. Or no,
7th?
4th? Canadian here, guys. Canadian. If we haven't heard parties, candidates champion for cannabis now, no, I think Chris, you're right. We're not going to see legalization in the next 4 years. There's not a chance. Sorry, I'm not sure how you guys could hear me. What I feel is the same thing that happened in Canada. You had two parties that were essentially neck and neck in terms of popularity in the polls and just amongst Canadians. One of those parties, which just so happened to be the Liberal Party, decided to grab onto the cannabis ticket. And that ticket really increased momentum for that party. And people give a lot of shame to single issue voters because they only come to the polls for one issue and one issue alone. It doesn't matter what brings you to the polls. It doesn't matter. I don't care if it's one issue, 100 issues, or just the fact that you've voted every election for your entire life. Going to the polls is a positive thing, and I encourage it. And I believe strongly that the Liberal Party in 2015 for the 2016 election, I could be incorrect here, realized that there was momentum behind that cannabis ticket in terms of saying that they would legalize it. Once they were elected in 2015, I think is what it was. It took 2 years for the government to actually legalize it, and essentially, in my opinion, all it was a drag out in order to say that we're working, and then when we got close to another election, it was like, look what we've done. Look what we've done. It just happened. Look what we've done. And it was done horribly, but I won't get, that's for another conversation. So I think Chris is right in terms of, will we see cannabis legalization in the States in the next 4 years? I do not. I think both the parties need to get some life injected into them when it comes to candidates and people that are at least under the 80 mark threshold. When it comes to age, we need people in there that are a lot younger than that have fresher ideas and people that are going to champion for things such as cannabis and so forth.
Yeah, and that are more connected to what's going on in the world. I think that's the difference too, is people who they may have used cannabis before when it was partying times, when you're just getting lit, turning up. And there's so many more benefits to it now. Even just knowing a society that's more docile and relaxed during all the turmoil we're dealing with right now. If everybody was a little bit more stoned, maybe they'd chill out. Maybe they'd chill out a little bit. I mean, it's not guaranteed, but I think that's where, yeah, it's very optimistic. I think that's the big difference, though, is legalization state by state or country by country. It's going to vary depending on who puts this in place. If you've got, the people who are in place saying, yeah, we're going to do it, look at what they're going to do. Because the key thing is you may not have a bill that gets passed that's for the user, that's for the consumer. It's more for the corporations and the companies. So I think that's where you get into the point where it's perfect. We've got the next episode talking about family, basically, and growing. So I've got my kids just screaming in the
think I heard
background.
that. Yeah, I
Perfect
think I heard
podcast
that.
day. Perfect podcast
Do
day.
you guys remember the time that BBC journalist was trying to do that interview and his little one came in the back and through the back door, and then his like wife comes sliding in her socks on the floorboard, and like, oh my God, did I relate to that so much? You know, and it's like, oh, the love. It was.
I know, and I saw because you got a cat linger, and I've got
Yep.
this little kitten is somewhere around here. I don't know where. I've heard it meow somewhere here. Yeah, dude, that's the podcast life.
You don't have
man.
a
But
life,
I think
do
you
you?
know.
Shame
No,
on
this
you,
is just
Rob.
it.
Shame on you.
This is just it. But I think that really summarizes it for, legalization this year. It's still kind of a shit show, man. You need to know local. Local is everything, and not just statewide. You need to look at, your local community in your city. Where I live, we just got our first approval for a medical dispensary. Mind you, it's been legal here for 12 years. 12 years. I mean, it's insane to say that.
I
12
think
years.
what's important too to remember is that, yeah, it's a shit show right now, but as someone who is in Canada and feels as if the way that it's been handled has been done insurmountably ineptly, has been done incorrectly. We've fumbled at every step of the way when it comes to regulating who can be participating in the system, how much of it can you have. Like there's a 4 plant minimum, or sorry, a cap
maximum
on how many plants you can grow. Like, come on, there isn't a tomato plant, there isn't a tobacco plant limit, there isn't a watermelon plant limit. You can grow. There isn't a bottling limit
hops
for liquor. If you were to hops, so it's like, so why on earth can you only grow 4 plants when it comes to that? So and I got a number of things, in terms of how much you can possess at one time, how much you can have, the amount of people that are still being arrested for growing cannabis at home. Like it's an incredibly daunting system when legalization is done incorrectly. So to build on your point, Rob, it's important. Although yes, you may be brought to the polls by a single issue, please do your homework on the candidates in which you're voting for. It is very important to understand where these people stand morally, fundamentally. Do they clash, or do they jive with what you believe in? Like I'm not trying to preach here, but it's just I know for a fact that my generation got pretty beat on when I say we because that's what happened, is we voted Trudeau in, and people said it was just a bunch of single issue voters. And what I think a lot of people failed to do was look at track records and look at do their homework and their due diligence on the candidates and so on and so forth. So we've been through a roller coaster, to say the least, in terms of our political guidance over the course of this legalization. But just make sure you understand your candidates as best as you can before you go into the polls, so you kind of get an idea what you might be in store for.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. Definitely do your research. I mean, I'm not sure when this podcast is going to be posted, whether it's before the election or after the election, but even if it's after the election, still make sure that you understand who is for it, as far as like your local officials, and support them. One thing that you can do to support reform of marijuana laws is supporting nonprofit organizations like NORML and Marijuana Policy Project. And one thing that people don't really know about is who shops on Amazon. Almost everybody shops on Amazon. A lot of people don't know that if you actually go to smile.amazon.com, any purchase you make through that website, it's basically the same website as Amazon, only it's just separate for financial purposes. You can actually support a nonprofit organization. So any purchase that I make through Amazon, it actually donates on my behalf to NORML. And again, they're working towards reforming these cannabis laws. So smile.amazon.com, easy way to work towards legalization.
Huge step. Had no clue. I'll be definitely changing up all the links if we can put them back on YouTube. Eventually, we'll do that. Yeah. So with that being said, man, I always enjoy talking everything cannabis, even politics with you guys. Of course, you don't normally get into politics, but we're getting into politics. We'll of course be smoking with you guys next time. For the crew here at From the Stash, Rob, Pigeons, Chris, Mr. Grote, obviously, and Green Goblin on the ones and twos. Another blunt.
Cheers,
Stay
guys.
with you, y'all.
Take care.